Good morning, everybody. It's Lorri Lown, Team Wilpers cycling coach. And gosh, I was just thinking as I was getting ready, do you ever wake up and you're just really excited about life? Like everything. I had one of those mornings where I just woke up and everything feels really awesome. So I'm going to embrace this today. Thanks for joining me today. Hi, Amy Murphy. And Brent is here as well. Good morning, everybody. So happy Friday. And here we are, finishing up week 2 of the Summer Sprint Challenge. We've gotten such good feedback in the groups. Some folks have emailed me. And hi, Marlon. Marlon posts graphs and charts and comparisons to previous years, which is awesome. And a lot of folks who are like, oh, I didn't want to do a sprint. Sprint is not my thing. And they've been like, wow, I actually kind of like this. So that's awesome. Something to look forward to next week. Brian Hammond and I recorded a great conversation about power profiling. So for those of you who have asked, what is this all about and why do we do it and what's the origin? We have a great interview for you next week. And I would say thank you for embracing the challenge. It's been awesome to be able to program something that folks really enjoy. So here we are going into week 3. And I would say we're going to continue the build. And it's going to be one more challenging week, a little more duration, a little more intensity, a little more TSS, a little more spice. And then week 4, you get a nice cutback. So if you want the most benefit out of this challenge, and I know I say this over and over and over again, and some of you believe me and some of you don't, I would say make sure to take rest days and recovery days and take your recoveries in your intervals. So we get the most benefit out of this when we do the least amount of work. And then we're optimizing our training. So that's our goal, right? Let's elicit a training response by doing the least amount of work possible. More is not better in this case. More is just more. And more actually creates more fatigue, which means we can't do the work. So what's the difference between rest and recovery? I was thinking about this because I see a lot of folks, they'll post a super easy ride or a yoga class or something and call it a rest day. Rest is just that. Rest is rest. Rest is no activity. Recovery, or what we like to call active recovery or adaptation days, would be doing something gentle that actually doesn't create training stress score, doesn't create load, but what it does is aids in your recovery. So that might be an easy walk or a yoga class or some stretching, maybe a zone 1 ride, maybe a zone 2 ride. Zone 3, nope, you're getting stress. So remember, recovery, it doesn't mean we're just going to go easy. It means we're trying to recover from the efforts we already did and prepare for the efforts we're going to do. So definitely try to embrace your recovery days and your rest days as much as you embrace the training. There's my word of encouragement for today. We're going to do something a little different. I posted an AMA for this week and got some great questions and got some questions via email as well. Some of the questions are about Peloton, some about outdoor riding. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. And I'm going to start. Adriana A. Valente posted a question and she said, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. I really appreciate when instructors give detailed descriptions for positions. Please share what part of the foot to use when pushing down and then up. Thanks. And I was going to grab a shoe. Let me grab a shoe. So I have a visual aid. Anyways, so let's talk about the foot. So the foot is a conduit. We're really pedaling from the upper part of our leg, the glutes, the hamstrings, the quads. And in order to make this all work, obviously, the activity up there has to get down to the pedal. So we have a series of fulcrums and levers, and they all have to be in the right place. in order to work well. So if you are riding with a saddle that's too low, you're not very efficient. How many of you see kids out on the road? I do, because they want to touch the ground. That's the big thing. I see kids out on the road and their saddles are so low and I'm like, that's miserable. They're usually riding with, you know, their mom or dad on a road bike and they're going way too easy. But anyways, everything has to be in the right place. So bike fit is super important. Biomechanics, it doesn't work well if we're not positioned correctly. And then I would say the other thing that's really, really important is your cleat position. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see in the bike fit world in general, and especially in the Peloton world. There is a video out there that tells you to do the exact wrong thing. I will say that from an instructor. And I wish that video would go away. But here's what we want to think about. When I position my cleat, this becomes a fulcrum point. So it allows me to angle my foot in different positions. If my cleat is too far forward, what happens is it pushes me down into the pedal. I'm pedaling with my toes. We call that bike ballet. I actually fit an actual ballerina the other day. And I was like, oh yeah, bike ballet. Anyways, so we don't want to push down into the pedal. What we want to do is push down through the midfoot, basically. So in order to do that, my cleat has to be far enough back to allow me to have the right angles with my ankle, my knee, my hip. So anyways, this is a fulcrum. So typically, further back is better. If you're riding platform pedals, typically you'll be behind the ball of the foot or on midfoot. So it gives you a really good fulcrum point. So that's super important. The joint angles are super important. So having said all that, what part of the foot are we pedaling? There we go. I seem to be having challenges today at the beach. It's raining. Go figure, in July in California, which never happens. And when it rains, our Wi-Fi goes out. So anyway, yes, Maggie. I wear white shoes outside. Maggie likes the color of my shoe. Maggie has some clothing questions later, and bike questions. And yes, so when I got my Peloton shoes, I was like, I want a pair of bright shoes. I wore them when I rode in the studio. So anyways, back to the angle of the foot and discomfort all the way up to the knee when the cleat's in the wrong place. So when I talk about the pedal stroke, I like to use an analogy of throwing a ball. I can't throw a ball. I can't catch a ball, but we all understand that. So if I were to throw a ball and I would use my hand, if I were just to use my hand like this, what would happen? The ball would land basically in front of me. And if instead I throw the ball by extending my arm, oops, and then using my hand, where would the ball go? A little bit in front of me. Now, if I really want to be effective throwing a ball, what I'm going to do is rotate my torso, extend my arm behind me, throw the ball, and then the hand, right? So I have a wind up, I have the throw, and I have the follow through. So the wind up in cycling is the top of the pedal stroke. So when I think about pedaling, I think about this. As I come over the top, I drop my heel, I'm driving down and forward. And what that does is it elongates the posterior chain of muscles. So it kicks in the hamstrings, it kicks in the glutes, assuming I'm in a hip hinge. And that's super important. If we're sitting upright, we don't have a hip hinge, and then we don't get the same force production that we would otherwise. So again, bike fit is super important. And so drive the heel down, drive the heel forward. Now, most of you have heard the instructors talk about pulling back or dragging back like you're scraping your shoe. So that's the actual throw. And the follow through is when we pull up. But we're not really producing a lot of power in the pull up. We are deloading the other pedal, which means it allows me to pedal harder on the other side, right? That's why when we look at the design of bicycles, one pedal is basically in an opposing position to the other. So kind of simple stuff there, but so what part of the foot do we use? Well, we use all of it. And if I'm feeling too much pressure in the front, if I'm towing down, either my saddle's too high or I just haven't learned how to drive that heel down. So that's an important aspect. And I will say, for those of you who are interested in learning more technique one-on-one, book an appointment with me or with Brian, because we'll help you with that in a bike fit appointment or a technique appointment. So it looks like lots of folks are here and saying hello. Thank you all for being here. Let's see, where were we? Anyways, so that's Adriana's question. Michael O'Neill had a very long question, and I summarized it a little bit. He said, is it okay to vary your equipment and clothing, which would adjust your position on the bike for what you were fitted for? Meaning, can I wear different clothes and will my fit still be valid? I'm thinking it may be good to have a little variance, like when you are running and use different shoes to give you different ride to work the foot a bit differently during the run. So yes and no. But mostly yes, it's okay to mix it up. So what Michael is referring to is when we wear different running shoes, it allows us to use our body slightly differently, and that's good to prevent fatigue and injury, right? And so same thing applies on the bike. Is it okay to wear a different kit? Sure. It doesn't actually affect your fit all that much. And I would say, when I talk about kit, and we'll talk about this later, we're referring to everything. We're referring to our clothing, our helmet, our optics, right? Our glasses, our shoes, our socks, our gloves. That's kit in cycling. What affects us the most? Well, our contact with the saddle. So can I wear different bibs with different padding, or different shorts with different padding, or maybe even wear just compression shorts that don't have pads? Yes, you can. It really has a minimal impact on your fit. Millimeters, if anything. Now, what I would say is shoes do have an impact, shoes and cleats. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. But remember that when we fit you within a range of angles. So I'm not in an absolute at the knee. I actually have a 10-degree range of angle. And so there's little aspects of differential that are okay. And my body is different every day. My flexibility may feel, especially as you age. So flexibility may feel different. My mobility may feel different. My power production, I may have fatigue. So yes, little variation does not change your bike fit. The difference. Oh, but the good thing about that is, like Michael said, different contact points. So let's say I'm doing a lot of indoor riding during the winter. I may switch up my bibs because they have a different chamois from one brand to another. So it changes the contact point on the saddle. So it may be a comfort issue. The caveat is shoes. And what I would say here is there is a difference in what we call stack height. Right? So how high the shoe is, that interface with the pedal might be different if I have one shoe that has a thicker sole than another shoe. So that's going to affect my saddle height, and also cleat position will have an effect on that. So if I have two different shoes in cycling, I want to make sure that I match that cleat position. I duplicate that cleat position based on the back of the shoe, not the front of the shoe. So I'm going to measure up. Most of you probably don't need to have multiple shoes, but maybe you like to match your kit, and so you have different colors. But anyways, yes, so change it up. It's fine. It doesn't really affect your fit. I would say just caution here if I change my shoes. Michael's second part of the question was, when is it time to replace parts? I'm thinking I'm turning 60. It's time to replace parts like knees and no. Thinking bike parts, but maybe kit as well. So we'll answer this as best as I can. The parts on the bike, keep it clean. Spray it down with a little rubbing alcohol. Nothing, no solvents, just rubbing alcohol because it dries. Wipe it down. And Peloton recommends you replace your pedals once a year. Why? Because they had a class action lawsuit. I probably shouldn't say this. But anyways, they do recommend you replace your pedals once a year. I would say that's not a bad idea. You do not have to replace them with the Peloton pedals. You can get another set of Look Delta pedals. They're no longer under patent, so other companies are selling them. Look is actually not. But they are compatible. Just make sure you get the Look Delta pedal if that's what you have from Peloton. Cleats and shoes. People ask me this all the time, and I'm like, never. You don't walk outside with your cycling shoes that you use inside, and you're not in the weather. Those are the two things that really create wear on a shoe. The only thing I would say is maybe sweat is going to make the shoe less firm, not the sole itself, but the shoe itself. It becomes more stretchy and pliable maybe. But I would say most likely you don't need to replace your shoes or cleats for an indoor setup. Unless you really want to. You want something new, or something changes in your foot. You've had a surgery, or maybe your shoes weren't appropriate in the first place. They gave you an aroma or whatever. So yeah, maybe. How do I know? Well, if I'm starting to have a hard time clipping in or out, that's usually a good clue. Or if I pull out inadvertently by mistake. So that's another clue that maybe I should change the cleats. By the way, in cycling, this is called a shoe. This is called a cleat. I know in running and soccer and other sports, the entire shoe and all the little spikes are called cleats. I think the difference is here because we have so many different pedal systems. So this is the shoe, this is the cleat. We don't refer to the whole thing as a cleat. Yeah, so that's it. And then the other thought I had was about when should I change my bibs or my shorts that have padding, that have a chamois. And I would say if you start to experience any discomfort, a saddle sore, some chafing, some numbness, that's usually a good time to replace. As long as I care for my technical clothing appropriately, they should last a long time. But I actually think we get a little more wear on the indoor bike than we do on the outdoor bike because we're in the same position. We're getting a lot more sweat in the chamois and the padding because it's warm in our space. So anyways, so when you think things are feeling less comfortable, that's a good clue to replace them. When they start to look worn, you don't really notice that the padding has worn down until you get a new pair and you're like, oh yeah, this feels so good. So replace when you need, when comfort becomes an issue. Noah Weisberg, senior. I had a question, Noah. What makes someone a senior? When do you become a senior? I was thinking about this, right? So there probably is a Noah Weisberg Jr., but until there's a junior, you're not a senior, right? So you can answer that question for me on the Facebook group. He said, I previously received a bike fitting for my Peloton from someone amazing. Thank you, Noah. I appreciated fitting you. If I'm buying a Zwift ride, and for those of you not familiar, Zwift is another online platform geared toward outdoor cyclists. And the Zwift Ride is a bike frame, basically, that's meant to go on an indoor trainer. So we don't use it outside at all. It's a way to not use your outdoor bike, or if you don't have an outdoor bike, to use the platform. Noah says, can I place the two bikes next to each other and copy the saddle hard bar position, etc.? I know there'll be some differences in geometry, but would that get me close, or is it very different? And again, every coach's favorite answer, it depends, yes and no. I would say, first of all, ignore the guide, the bike fit guide that comes with the Zwift Ride. It is ridiculous. And I would say this bike is more like an outdoor bike than a Peloton or a stationary bike. So what you could do is calculate your saddle height and depth. And this would assume you have the same saddle on both. If you don't, it gets a little more complex, and I'm happy to answer that in an email if you want to shoot me an email. What you're going to do is measure from the pedal spindle up to the top of the saddle. Normally, we would measure from the bottom bracket, which is where the axle from left to right is, but there may be a difference in the crank length. The crank is what holds the pedal, that long thing, or also known as a crank arm. So measure from the pedal spindle up to the top of the saddle. Typically, I will put something flat on the saddle to make this measurement, like a clipboard or a book, and measure to that because saddles have contour, so it's hard to find the right spot. And then you're going to measure, again, assuming the same saddle, the nose of the saddle behind the bottom bracket and match those two. That should get you in the right spot with your saddle. And then I would say you can find a bar height and reach, because there's also a reach adjustment on this bike, that feel comfortable to you. What we want to achieve is that hip hinge. So we don't want to be upright. We don't want the bar too close or too high. So hip hinge, and then you want about a 90-degree angle at the shoulder. That'll put you in neutral spine. The one thing I will say about the Zwift Ride, I have one, there are some limitations, like the bar is wide and they tell you not to change it. I did. The cranks are long and there now are different crank lengths. So those are limiters. Yeah, so find the right bar position. And it's funny because when I've done some of my longer rides, like 4 and 5 hours on Zwift, I actually switch up my bar position a little bit because that affects your contact point in the saddle. So it feels a little more comfortable. Amy, thank you for the compliment on the good reminders. I got a couple questions from you. First one was, is it possible to start riding on gravel without a specific gravel bike without damaging the bike you use on the road? And I would say yes. And we've done it for a long time before there were gravel bikes. Hashtag road bikes on dirt. And what I would say is the biggest difference, the geometry of the bikes are very similar. For example, I have a Specialized Crux and I have a Specialized Athos, and they are basically the same frame. But what is different? The carbon layup on the down tube of a gravel bike is going to be stronger, because depending on what type of terrain I ride, I might get rocks that fly up and hit the frame. And on the Athos, which is a super light carbon bike, the lightest bike in the world, it could very well damage the carbon. It could crack it. And so they build up the layup of the carbon. It's heavier, and that's going to protect my bike. So that's a disadvantage of taking your really nice road bike out on dirt. Now, if it's chill dirt, no problem. You know, I'm riding a farm road, or I'm riding a fire road or a forest road that doesn't have a lot of rocks or anything. It's just dirt, an unpaved road. Yes. But gravel means different things in different places in the world. In Northern California, where I ride, it means mountain bike trails, and we have a lot of rocks. So you have to be careful with that. The other advantage of a gravel bike is you typically can get wider clearance. So I would say if you're riding your road bike, wider clearance for your tires, I should specify that. If you're riding your road bike, go with the widest tire you can get that has frame clearance. And you have to remember that on dirt, we run a lower tire pressure, PSI, and it may have a little bit of give. So we want to make sure that when we're riding it with lower pressure, the tire doesn't hit the frame, because that's going to damage the frame. So I would say work with your bike shop and see what your options are. But yes, you can ride your road bike on dirt. And then Amy had a second question, which was about bike maintenance. What are the important steps that folks should take to care for their bikes after a big event or a long ride? Because Amy just did a 200-mile ride. And what should occur after every long ride? What should occur monthly, weekly, whatever? So I like to break bike maintenance down into time increments. So there are certain things that I might do at the beginning of the season or the end of the season to prepare for the next year, especially for those of you who don't ride outside year round. So I'm going to look at what is my season preparation. I break it down into A, B, C, airs, brakes, tires. Ooh, chain ring. Sorry, air, brakes, chain, ABC. And that refers to the whole drivetrain. So anyways, ABC, air, tires. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make sure that tires are in good condition. I'm going to add sealant if I'm running tubeless. I'm going to make sure that my brakes work and the brake pads haven't worn out, or the rotors, or any of that, right? I might get a brake bleed if I have hydraulic brakes. I might change cables. So that's an annual maintenance type thing. And then the drivetrain. I want to make sure that the chain hasn't stretched and the chain rings and the cassettes aren't damaged. So that's kind of the annual thing. And I would say after a big event, I'm going to check the same things, especially if I have an event where I'm doing a lot of descending or I'm on mixed terrain and my tires are going to take a lot of wear and tear. And the other thing that I would say on an annual basis that I want to check, my kit, basically, my other equipment. Yes, brakes are important. They stop the bike when you need to. They modulate your speed at high speed. So they don't do everything else, but a lot of people over brake. So I want to make sure I take care of them. Or if I ride a lot in wet conditions, brakes are definitely affected by that, as are the rims, if you have rim brakes. Anyways, other things that I want to check at the beginning of the season. My hydration pack, if I use one. Did it get all moldy because I forgot to clean it at the end of last season? Is it still working? Do I need to replace bite valves? Or did my weight change and I need a different size or I need to adjust it? My saddlebag and my toolkit. Do I have everything that I need? Did I use some CO2 or a tube because I had a flat and I forgot to put it back in? So those are kind of season things. I'm going to check my helmet. So I'll inspect to make sure it doesn't have too much wear. The foam's not cracked. The plastic's not cracked on the outside. Do I need to replace it? I'm going to check my shoes. Do they work? Do all the dials and the Velcro work? Are my cleats in good condition? And are my pedals maintained? So all of those things I would check on an annual basis. I like to, it's kind of like cleaning the toilet or the shower. If you do it once a year, it's like an awful task. But if I do it every time I ride, it's just a little bit. So I tend to do everything, every ride. I will check ABC, air brakes, chain. So what am I going to look at? I'm going to wipe my frame down and I'm going to look for damage. I'm going to keep the sugary stuff off the frame because it damages the paint. It might, if I have external cables, it might affect my cables. I'm going to wipe down the tires with a damp rag so I can see if there are any slices or debris and maybe replace. I will lube the chain if needed and wipe off the lube. And then I'm going to top off the sealant in the tires about every 3 months. So, okay. One more question from Maggie. Maggie says, are there specific bikes used for different types of races? And is there specific kit to wear? So everything in cycling is governed by UCI, which is the Union Cycliste International, the International Cycling Union. And yes, we use different types of bikes for different types of races. We have road bikes, and within road bikes, I might have a climbing bike or a criterium bike, or then I might have a time trial bike. And in the triathlon world, there would be a triathlon bike, and they're slightly different. So a time trial or a triathlon bike is built to be super aerodynamic. Those are the ones with the bars in the front. And they don't handle very well. You wouldn't ride it for your everyday bike. In gravel, as I mentioned, I might have a gravel bike, which really is an endurance road bike that will take, wider clearance and slightly different gearing. In mountain biking, I might have an enduro bike, a cross-country bike, a downhill bike. There used to be a mountain bike. Now we have all these bikes. And in BMX, we also have a different bike that looks like a kid's bike, and the saddle's often angled up. So yes, different bikes, different horses for different courses. And then what kit to wear. Typically when we're racing, we want to wear something that's not going to create drag. So it might be aerodynamic. Typically that's going to be a jersey and bibs. If it's cold or rainy, we may add base layers. We may add a vest. Nowadays we see people in what are called race suits or speed suits. We're a little different than skin suits. It's typically bibs and jersey that are attached, but you can still get out of them a little easier. And they're a little more aerodynamic. And then we might have a skin suit as well, which is basically Lycra painted onto your body, and it's not easy to get in and out. Gravel riders tend to want more pockets for things. So they might have cargo bibs, right? Bibs that have little pockets on the side, kind of like a dress with pockets, right? Every woman will understand that. I actually don't like cargo bibs. I feel funny when I put things on the side of my legs, but some people love them, which is great. So yes, different kit, different bikes. Indoors, you may wear the same thing. You may wear fashion. I was always surprised by how fashionable everybody is in the Peloton world. If my sports bra matches my bibs and my socks, I'm surprised when I ride inside. But I had one more question, and that was from Jeff Heim. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Jeff, it's faster than you can climb a hill. About 24 miles an hour. So anyways, back to the challenge, the basics. It's on the Team Wilpers platform. There are PDFs with clickable links. You've got a 3-ride challenge that's free. It is also posted on the Facebook group. You can upgrade to all access for $9.95 a month, and then you get the 5 rides, plus strength, plus running, plus everything else, and maybe even, well, we won't promise anything else. So anyways, there's member discounts too. And then I encourage you to join your chat groups on Facebook and ride together, be social, and use the hashtag Team Wilpers Cycling. So there we go. Thank you all for joining this morning. And Coach Lorri logging out, and I'll see you on the leaderboard.